Hi there, I'm Robert Cooper, the author of the book The Red Triangle, and I've been asked to give you some insight as to what the book is about. The Red Triangle is a piece of historical research into the phenomenon known as Masonophobia. Now, Masonophobia is a new word which has emerged to replace the wishy-washy phrase anti-Masonry, because that tends to fall into the same kind of category as anti-car or anti-smoking. It conveys nothing of the nastiness, the viciousness of attacks made, particularly in the recent past, against Freemasonry. However, the whole point of the book is to attempt to provide an introduction to the subject. Sadly, once the research had commenced, it became very clear that Masonophobia has been around almost as long as Freemasonry itself, and therefore the subject is simply too vast to include everything in one volume. However, the starting point is indeed the first known attacks against Freemasonry, and so it's a kind of historical, chronological account of those who have attacked Freemasonry down the years and centuries. So there is some straightforward historical information about the origins of Freemasonry contained within the book, but perhaps more disturbing than these very early attacks are those that are examined of more recent vintage, particularly those from the 1990s, which for whatever reason were particularly vicious. It's the reasons why these attacks were made and have been made down the centuries that is the subject of the book. It's an attempt to try and understand the process that leads to Freemasonry being attacked. Some of the information uncovered during the process of research is actually rather disturbing. For example, Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, was recruited by the Gestapo for his administrative ability. The first job that he was given as a member of the Gestapo was to create a card index to identify and track every Freemason then resident in Nazi Germany. Using that card index system, many Freemasons were sacked from their job in the public sector, be it in the civil service, or the post office, or the judicial system. Many of them were sent to concentration camps, and many of those ended up in the gas chambers. So Adolf Eichmann and Freemasonry rarely appear in the same sentence. Yet here we have a situation where he cut his teeth on creating a system to identify members of a minority group. His ability was recognized, his genius, his administrative genius, was recognized by the Gestapo hierarchy, and he was moved to another section to create another card index system to deal with another problem group, in this case, the Jews. So here we have a situation where probably the best known victims of the Holocaust were identified using an administrative method that was used to identify Freemasons. Now, the system was also used to identify other people, not only in Germany, but other occupied countries, something that's also explored in the Red Triangle. But groups such as black people, disabled people, Jehovah's Witnesses, members of the gay community, trade unionists, members of other churches, that kind of thing, were all the subject of Eichmann's card index system. However, all those victim groups are well known as being victims of the Holocaust, of the Nazi regime, all except, of course, Freemasonry. For whatever reason, Freemasonry is not seen to have been a victim or victims of the Holocaust. That is rather odd, and the book, The Red Triangle, attempts to investigate why that should be. However, the book does not dwell overly long, I don't think anyway, on the Nazi persecution of Freemasonry, and is also more interested perhaps in trying to understand contemporary history in terms of Masonophobic attacks. The simple question ultimately is asked: why is Freemasonry considered differently from any other minority group in society? It's no longer acceptable to discriminate against disabled people. It's no longer acceptable to discriminate against Muslims, members of the gay community, etc., etc., and quite rightly so. Why Freemasonry is not seen in that same way is investigated in The Red Triangle. That said, there are a number of conclusions or a number of reasons why that is so, given in the book. One of them, and this is explored in considerable detail, is that as society becomes more sophisticated in how it treats its citizens, how it treats members of that society, numbers of groups that are politically acceptable to attack are decreased in number. So it's no longer acceptable to attack disabled people, physically or metaphorically, but that doesn't apply to Freemasonry. Question is why? One conclusion is this: that as the number of groups that you can blame for things going wrong declines in number, there is only one politically correct group left on which to blame, or for which to attribute blame for all the ills of society, and that is Freemasonry. It seems in some ways that it's politically correct or politically acceptable to attack Freemasonry for the ills of society. That is, it is an acceptable scapegoat where no other minority group is allowed to be put into that position.